This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com, and I had this lovely ECW original diva on for a brief period of time. I believe it was last year, and now she's back, the queen of extreme herself, Francine, legendary ECW manager who's very busy still, as busy as ever. Maybe you could tell us what you've been up to today so far.
Oh, today? Well, I took care of the kids and my mom this morning, took a shower, got ready, did my podcast, did 3 Patreon episodes. Now I'm with you. And then I'm going to do some cameos. I'm going to do my Twitch stream. And then maybe get to sleep for a couple hours and then maybe do some all over again tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see. That's the beauty of working from home. You could juggle your schedule around, but today was packed. So,
yeah, luckily I get to work from home too, so it's similar. If people want to check out the interview that I did with you on your Patreon, how could they do that?
Well, the interview that we did is on your YouTube.
Yes, but you also interviewed me.
Oh, for your, oh yeah. Well, yeah. They would have to join the Patreon. So it is patreon.com/Francine podcast. And they could see your interview and hundreds more that we've done. So yeah, it's a fun little channel.
Now, I understand you were always a wrestling fan growing up.
No.
Wrong. Wikipedia is wrong.
Wrong. I don't know who wrote my wiki page, but yeah, definitely wrong. Never a wrestling fan growing up. I had a lot of nieces and nephews, and I know that like my nephews would sometimes have wrestling on. So in passing, I would see, maybe Hulk Hogan or Randy Savage, but I never got into it until I was about 19 years old. So wasn't a fan at all growing up.
Now, when you were 19, is that when you became involved with ECW, or did someone take you to an event? How did that connection take place?
So I started watching WWF, and I was also a global wrestling fan. Those were the 2 feds that I had interest in at the time. I actually went to some shows. I lived in Philadelphia at the time, so I was going to some shows. I think WWF came to us maybe, I don't know, was it every 6 weeks or something like that? So I would go and I would watch them for house shows. And then I entered a contest that WWF was holding through a channel called Video Jukebox Network. And it was this network where you can pay like $1 or something, $1.99, and you can request a video that you wanted to see at that moment. And they were holding this, it was a WrestleMania CD party. So they had just released the CD for WrestleMania, the album. And you had to send in a postcard. And this is before I even got into wrestling. I didn't know anybody. And I entered this contest as a fan, and I ended up winning the grand prize. So the grand prize consisted of $500 in cash, a trip to New York City, which they flew me from Philadelphia to New York, which was silly. You got to go to Monday Night Raw and sit in the front row. And you also got to attend the album party at Madison Square Garden. And that's when I first met these wrestlers. And I remember Hacksaw Jim Duggan was there. Tatanka was there. Lex Luger was there. And this picture keeps popping up all over Twitter of Lex and I standing there taking a picture. And everybody thinks that I was part of the Lex Express tour. And I wasn't. It had nothing to do with the Lex Express gimmick. It was just for this album release. Vince McMahon was there. I had to do a commercial for the Jukebox Network with Vince McMahon. There was like a bunch of the boys there. That was my first little taste of being like around wrestlers and the business and stuff. And I remember going to Raw that night, and they drove. I had a driver pick me and my friends up. And back then is when it was like general admission at the Manhattan Center. So people were standing in line since like 6 a.m. to get front row. And here I come right before bell time, and I walk out and they escort me in, and I got booed. The whole line booed me because I got escorted in, and plopped right into the front row. So that was my first taste, like of being that close to wrestlers and stuff like that. But it was shortly after that I saw ECW on television, and it was like a Tuesday afternoon. They were on at 6 o'clock. I was eating dinner, and I watched them for a month or so, and I was just like, man, I think I can do this. And I don't know why I thought that, because again, I didn't know anyone in the business really. I just had met the guys at the party, but didn't keep in touch with anybody, like, just a fan. But I hated my job. I was working at an insurance company, and I said, I'm going to try it, because if I don't try, I'll never know. And I just called this number, and they told me to go meet with Todd Gordon. And that's what happened.
Now, just to go back to WWE in the early 90s, what kind of crowds were they getting in Philadelphia?
I remember I always got floor seats. It wasn't a problem to get floor seats. So I was always like in the first 10 rows, to watch these house shows. I don't remember the buildings being completely full, obviously, because I think it was the Spectrum back then, which was a decent sized arena, but I never remember house shows selling out back then.
Now, you're meeting with Todd Gordon. People have negative and positive to say about him. I met him. He seemed really nice, but I never worked for him. How did that go when you actually met him in person?
Yeah, it's a funny story, because, I think I'm about 20 years old now, and I was told where to go to meet Todd, and it's a pawn shop. And, I didn't know anything about Todd or ECW. I just knew what I saw on television. So my dad's like, well, I'll drive you down there. And I said, okay. And he waited in the car in the parking lot, because it's on Jewelers Row. And I just remember walking up, and there's these bars all over the window, and I had to get buzzed in, and there were ladies standing there behind these counters trying to, I guess, sell the jewelry or whatever. And they just told me, go walk down the corridor, and there's Todd. And I was scared to death, because I'm just like, where am I? I didn't know anything about anything. And Todd was just sitting there, with his legs up and just his arms folded. He's looking at me, and like the first thing he says was, "You're a pretty girl. You won't have to bump." And I didn't know what a bump was, so I was just like, "Oh, that's great," But later on, I found out I would bump a lot, and I was okay with that.
So, how much training did you have before you started making appearances with the company?
So my mind frame was I was going to be this, professional wrestler. I was going to be a women's wrestler, and they had me go in there, and I was the only girl at the school at the time. Stevie Richards was there with me, and there were these other guys that were there, and they wanted me to do a tryout match in front of Todd Gordon. And I did the match, and after the match was over with, I went and I just threw my guts up. I didn't have a lot of training at that point. I was just taught the basics. And I went and I got really sick in the bathroom, which a lot of the guys and girls do. And then I came back out, and I don't remember if Todd said anything to me. He probably said, that was good or whatever, But when I got home, I was told that I needed to, I was going to work at Montgomeryville, Pennsylvania. And that's when I met Paulie, because that's when Eddie Gilbert was, heading out and Paul was coming in. So I guess Todd said that he saw something in me, because then Paul wanted to meet me. And I remember meeting Paul for the first time, and him telling me, you're just going to pretend to win a beauty contest, and you're going to be like the timekeeper. You're going to sit there until 911 grabs you. And when he grabs you, you're going to take a choke slam. Well, we didn't take choke slams in wrestling school at that point. I really wasn't sure what it was. And I just said to Paul, I'm not sure what that is. And I remember Paul saying, what, you don't want to do it? And I was like, no, I'll do it. Like, what's my cue? And he's like, don't worry. Somebody's just going to come and grab you and give you the move. And I was like, okay. So I ran to Macy's and I bought this ugly ass dress. It's all I could find at that point. And I pretended I was a beauty queen, and I'm walking. I remember there was a wooden staircase. I came down the stairs and I did this because I thought I was supposed to be this like beauty queen. And I sat at the table and I rang the bell and waited for the cue. And I just remember Al coming over to me and just grabbing me by the hair. And he gave me the choke slam. And it was that white noise where you heard like a gasp and then you heard nothing. And they put me like on a stretcher and they took me out the door. I didn't even go to the locker room. Out the door, they had me go in a car and then someone drove me right home. And I didn't see anybody. I didn't talk to anybody. I waited for a phone call. And then I got the phone call and they were like, come back. And I said, okay. And that's how it all started. So
now also on your Wikipedia, this could be wrong, so we'll set the record straight.
Could be wrong.
Is it true around this time WWE contacted you about being Sister Love, Brother Love's assistant?
I don't think it was this early on. I was with the Pitbulls when I was getting phone calls from a man named Ed Cohen. And he would call pretty consistently. If I wasn't home, he'd talk to my mom. And like I would come home and my mom would say, oh, this really nice man named Ed called. And he said you would make a lot more money in WWF than with Paul Heyman. And, my mom didn't get the business and I was still green as grass and I was scared to leave. And after a month or so of getting these phone calls, I didn't tell anybody. I kept it to myself because Ed just kept telling me, don't tell Paul I called you. So I kept it a secret for a while. And then I felt like I was like cheating on the company. And I felt like I was being deceitful. So I went to Paul and I confessed everything. And I said, he's been calling me for like a month or two now. And, they want me to work there. And I told them the gimmick. They wanted to put red on me and just, they told me they were tired of having models come in every city. They wanted like a face that would be, consistent. And they thought that I would be a good fit for that. And Ed even said, you won't have to bump. And I was just like, and at that point I was bumping and trying to make a name for myself. I said, well, if I go there, it'll be more money, but I won't get to work. And I really fell in love with the business and I wanted to work, really hard. So I just said to Paul, what do I do? And he just looked at me with this panicked look and he says, I can't compete with them. And I said, I know you can't compete with them. I said, can I just get a raise? Because I wasn't being paid huge money in the beginning. I said, can I just get like a little raise? And he said, yeah. And he threw a number at me and I said, I'm staying. And I remember him just hugging me so tight. And that was it. That's the story. Never went.
Do you have any regrets about that looking back?
No, not one regret. Not one. Because I feel like if I would have went there, my career would have went in a completely different direction. And, if they would have just put red paint on me, let me stand there and not do a thing, would the fans respect that? Would they want to see me every week? I don't think so. I'd rather work my ass off and make a name for myself and make less money and be remembered, years later for the work that I did.
So for your time with Stevie Richards, I guess he would have been the first person you managed regularly in ECW. How did you like working with him and the angles that came out of that, which was, I guess, the first cat fighting type angles in ECW?
Yeah. So Stevie was the first one I was paired with on television. I was working for a year or so for like house shows. They would pair me with random people. I was paired with Tommy Dreamer a lot. And finally, they got Beulah in and they needed a girl to counter her. And that's when they said, okay, we're going to do this angle and you're going to be a rabid fan of Stevie Richards. And I was like, oh, that's fun. So I looked at him and saw what he wore. So I went down to Wildwood, New Jersey to the boardwalk. And I had a bunch of these cut off shorts made with his name airbrushed on the back of it. And was a plant. And I just remember them escorting me out in the middle of the show. And, you know, back then ECW didn't draw a lot of girls to the product. So there weren't many of us in the crowd. So when I would come out dressed like I was, the guys would either be like trying to like touch my arm or touch my hair, or they would ask me questions. Are you married? Do you have a boyfriend? It was a little scary at first because I was just like, okay, I need some help here. You know, no one ever crossed the line while I was sitting in the audience. But when Beulah and we did one spot where we actually fought over the guardrail and we were catfighting on the floor of the arena in between chairs. And as we're going, we are getting groped, we are getting kicked. It was terrible. And I remember telling her, we have to get out of here. It was so unsafe. And that's the first and last time we ever did that spot, because it was too much. They beat the crap out of us. It was very scary.
What would your reaction be?
I'm sorry, I didn't answer you. Stevie was great to work with. He was great to work with. So no complaints about him.
Speaking of Stevie, I've never actually met him, but he does have like a reputation of a lot of people not liking him. Where does that come from? Because I really don't know where that comes from, even though I don't use it.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I met him so early on. You know, I think I might have even met him the day I met Todd, and that was in 1993. So I knew Stevie for a really long time, and I never remember having a problem with him. You know, he was good to work with. He was easy to work with. I don't know where all the hate comes from. So I couldn't answer that question.
Yeah, because he's one of the instructors at DDP Yoga, and it seems like he wouldn't necessarily be the type that would be hated so much, but I don't know.
I don't know either.
So as far as you mentioned people groping you, just for female managers out there, because I know it still happens where guys will just grab them. What's your advice when something like that happens? Because it's so hard to do something about it a lot of the time.
For me, I used to fight back, which I remember one time it was, I think we were up in Boston, and Shane and I, you know, we had a tremendous amount of heat back then on us, which was great because that, you know, we were heels. So that's what you want. But I remember going to the ring, and it was a narrow entrance. And I remember us walking, and a guy, I don't know if he meant to punch me, but he did. He might have been aiming for Shane, but he got me and he clipped me right in the back of the head. And I remember turning around, and it was this really tall, redheaded, he had like a long mullet, and I grabbed him by his hair, and I pushed him into the guardrail, and I held him there until security came, and he didn't fight me back, and they kicked him out of the arena. Atlas security with us was great, but there were times when a hand would come through a hole, you know, if there was an opening or a hole or something, and they would grab me. And I would just try to see who it was and get them removed from the building. Because really, is that really worth you missing the rest of the show? Just getting like a cheap feel with a girl that you know is never going to come home with you. Is it worth it? I don't think so. You know, and it's disrespectful too. I always said, call me any name that you want, because that's heat. Like I don't mind. I've been called every name in the book out there, and it's fine. I'm okay with that. But don't cross the line and touch us. Not even just me, just anybody. Don't put your hands on the wrestlers. We're out there putting our bodies on the line for you. I think it's really disrespectful. You know, it's a work. Come on. And if you don't, it is. We know that. But don't be disrespectful and try to hurt us or be rude. I never got that. You know, I guess we played our parts really well because we have been attacked many times. Too many to mention.
What was the worst attack that you were involved with? I know there's that big story. Lots of people are wanting to know about it, about this XPW thing. Would that have been the worst?
Well, so I was not attacked. we had to cover it up somehow. The backstory on that is before the show started, the XPW guys bought tickets to see the event. Now, we were in California. It was our first time out there. We were doing this big pay-per-view. And we were told beforehand, look, there's like 5 or 6 of them. They said they just wanted to watch the show. Now, Paul had a notion something might happen. So Atlas were on their toes. Like, we didn't know what they were going to do, but they were ringside. They were in front row ringside, and they paid the money for the tickets. It wasn't like they got in for free or anything. I think they might have been told not to have their shirts on, so they weren't allowed to wear the XPW shirts. We all knew they were looking for publicity. So what happened, they waited till the main event, and they made the one girl stand on a chair as soon as we came out, and she took her shirt off, and she had a bra on, but she had these big boobs, and there was like this pop. And I turn around and she's up there and she's like, dancing, and the guys are like looking. And so I walked over and I just told her, get down off the chair. And she just looked at me like a deer in the headlights, and she looked scared. Like, she looked like they put her up to it. So I kind of felt bad for her in a way. But I said, get off of the chair. And I think I might have tapped her on her shoulder, so she knew I was behind her. Not one time did I hit her. Did she hit me? Nothing like that happened. As her and I were talking to each other, the boys took their shirts off, and they had their XPW shirts on, and they start doing their X or whatever they were doing. And the way they did that, Atlas ran over, and the one guy, I think his name was Supreme, bumped into the girl, and she fell off the chair. So everybody thought that I hit her, but I never touched her, and we never touched each other, really. I just tapped her on the shoulder to get off of the chair. So Joey, not wanting to put that company over, said a fan grabbed Francine, and then the locker room ran out, and then it was just chaos. So that is what happened. I did not see the fight that was outside because we were trying to do our match, but everybody else except for us was partaking in the fight in the back of the arena.
Yeah, you don't have many incidents like that these days. Wrestling has calmed down a lot.
I guess so. But I mean, I guess they were trying to say that we were in their backyard and all this. And it's just like, come on, man. It's disrespectful to the business. Like, we would never go to one of their shows and be like, oh, ECW. It's just, it was stupid. It was just.
Well, the bigger company's never going to go to the smaller company anyways.
Right. Yeah.
So you mentioned before about managing the Pit Bulls. Could you elaborate on how you ended up switching from Stevie to the Pit Bulls and what that experience was like?
So it was actually the opposite way around. I switched from, I left Stevie Richards and went over to the Pit Bulls. And while I loved, especially Gary, I was not a fan of the attire. It was like pleather outfits and looked like a dominatrix. It just wasn't my scene. But you do what you're told. So I did that. And I just remember talking to Paul, and I remember Paul telling me, this isn't the big picture. And, just keep that in the back of your head. So I guess at that point he had bigger plans for me. But I was not aware of what was to come.
And of course, after that, you had your most memorable run with Shane Douglas when he was also at his all-time peak. Could you explain how that came about?
Yeah, so Shane knows the story much better than I do. I think I was doing promos, and I would always get really, really nervous in the beginning. Now I'm much more relaxed 20 something years later. But when I first started, I as a lot of green workers do, you have trouble with your promos, and you can tell I was nervous. And Shane, I think, had just come back from, being Dean Douglas in WWF. And he just pulled me aside, and I didn't really know him at all, you know, and he was just telling me, you know, just relax. And he was giving me little tips on how to make the promos better. And Paul was watching us talk and we were standing in the corner or something talking, and Paul was watching the interaction. And that's when the light bulb went on in Paul's head and said, oh, they look good together. Maybe we should pair them. And I'm told that's how Shane and I became a couple on air, not off air, on air.
Yeah, he explained that you guys, I guess, would kind of kayfabe that you may have been like having an affair and stay in the same room even though you weren't. Is that true that you guys would actually share rooms?
There were 3 of us who shared a room. It was myself, it was Shane Douglas, and it was Damian Farron. Damian Farron ran our merchandise table. It was always the 3 of us. Damian would always drive, and it would be Shane and then me. So we were never like alone. And, I wasn't aware of the conversations that Paul and Shane would have. For me, I hated it because, I knew Shane was married, and it just made me look like a tramp. Like I'm hanging out with this guy for years, and the whole locker room thinks we're together. No one ever said anything to me except for one time Beulah mentioned it. And I said, we're not. And she said, well, everybody thinks you are. And I said, well, everybody's wrong, And then I remember one night after a show, we stopped at either like a 7-Eleven or a Wawa or something to get snacks. And it was Damian and myself and Shane. And Shane had gone in to pick up the snacks, and we waited in the car. And he comes back in the car, and he throws a Magnum condom at me. And I was like, what's that for? And he goes, Paul was behind me in line. And I just shook my head because I was like, he's feeding it. He's feeding everyone. You know what I mean? But Paul said, if the boys believe it, the fans will believe it 100 times more. So, to this day, I'm still arguing with people, telling them we were never a thing. Like, it was only in the ring. It was never outside of the ring. He was a friend. He was a mentor. We're still friends to this day. We talk, we text every day. We try to talk once or twice, a month on the phone. If not, we're texting. We're still very close friends. And we both admitted if he wasn't married, maybe something might have happened, because there was definitely an attraction there, but I never crossed the line. He never crossed the line.
I understand at one point when he was having matches with Bigelow, you broke your pelvic bone or something like that.
Good transition. Yes.
Can you tell us that story?
Sure. We were at the arena, the ECW arena in Philly, and Bam Bam was out there, and I was supposed to do a run in. We couldn't think of a spot in the back, and Bam Bam said, oh, just run out there and try to attack me, and I'll come up with something. And I said, okay. And, I trusted everybody I worked with. So I didn't think much of it. I just said, oh, maybe he'll bump me or something. I don't know. I had no clue what was going to happen. And so when I ran out there, he ends up picking me up and pressing me over his head. And like a month before, I think I had breast augmentation. So I'm up there and I'm saying to myself, my God, if I land on my chest, like I'm going to rupture an implant or something. He just threw me to the side. He just kind of, boop. And I remember it was seconds, but I felt like I was floating through the air for like a minute. And I'm saying to myself, I'm trying to turn my body to take a flat bump, but I couldn't turn in time. And I landed on my left hip, and they never aired it because it was so disgusting. Like, we watched it at the studio. You saw it pop out and then go back in. And Paul showed us about 10 times, and he's like, I can't air this. He goes, this is brutal. But when I came back that night and went to the locker room, Paul said, you have to go to the hospital. And I said, I'm not going to the hospital. And he said, okay. He said, if you can climb the steps, because I don't know if you guys saw the infamous speech from Barely Legal, but in the back, there was a wooden staircase to lead to the bathrooms. He said, if you can walk up that staircase, he said, you don't have to go to the hospital. Well, when I stood up, I could not put any weight on my left leg. And there was an ambulance, and he said, get in the ambulance. So I said, okay. So they took me to the hospital, and it was fractured in 2 places. So they told me you have to be on crutches for 7 weeks, and they gave me a thing of Dilaudid, and they sent me on my way.
Now, in those days, would Paul Heyman cover in-ring injuries like that?
He did for me. Yeah, I never paid a dime for any, hospital stuff.
That's good. You guys worked closely with Chris Candido as well. How was he, and what did you think of his kind of unique relationship he had with Tammy at that time?
So it's weird because, Chris came over first, and I loved Chris from the minute I met him. Super easy to get along with, super easy to work with, funny, so funny. And, a lot of people just have like a business relationship, but like the triple threat, the 4 of us, we hung out and talked when we weren't on the road. So I considered them all my brothers, and I connected with Chris right away, and I loved working with him. When things started to go downhill for Tammy with WWF, and, people were saying that she was coming over and working with us, people were actually telling me, you have to watch. You have to be careful. She'll stab you in the back. She'll this, she'll that. And I'm the type of person where I'm going to give you a chance, but I'm going to be on my toes. And the first night I met her, I was walking one way and she was coming up this way. And she literally leaned over and grabbed my arm, and she was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't wait to meet you. And I'm like, same. And she's like, we have to talk later. And I said, okay. And that's what happened. I found her, and we sat down and we got to talking. And the more I got to know her, the more I liked her, and I heard the rumors, but I never saw any of the stuff that was, being talked about with her and Chris. Like, that wasn't my business. I never brought it up. I never asked anyone. We took vacations together. I just didn't see it, and I've heard all the stories, and I know what people say about them. But I always felt like it was their private business, and it wasn't my place to say anything. So I never brought it up.
How was working with Taz?
I never had to really, I would have if I needed to, but I never had to interact with Taz. He never had to bump me or anything like that. But Taz has always been super nice to me. I never had a problem with him. I don't know if it's because I'm female. I wasn't a threat to any of the guys, really. I got along with almost everyone in that locker room, and Taz was one of the guys. He treated me like one of the boys. I think once after that table spot that I did, I think that just everybody looked at me in a different light, and they knew I was there to work and not to just be like a party girl or just a side piece to someone. I was there to work, and that's what I wanted to prove to everyone. So
when Shane went over to WWE, or was it WCW? I think. I guess he'd already been in WWE by the time you were with him.
Yeah.
Was there ever any offer for you to join him in WCW?
No, not that I know of. And to be quite frank with you, I don't know if I would have went. I probably wouldn't have went. No, now that I think hard about it. The only way that I would have went is if I had a crystal ball that told me you're going to go bankrupt. Because even though they went bankrupt, I probably would have made a lot more money in that company, to be honest with you. But no, ECW was my home. I never wanted to leave ever, I sunk with that ship.
So I guess you were probably taken care of financially the whole time then, in that case.
Well, there was a point where the checks were bouncing and we didn't get paid. I was owed, when we went bankrupt, I was owed, I think, $50,000 that I never got paid. But I can say that the 10 checks in a row that did bounce, I just went to Paul and I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to continue because I need to get paid. And he said, well, what do I owe you? And I gave him the number. And I also had $35 bounce check fees every time a check would bounce. So Paul gave me the money and he gave me the check fees. So he did make up for that, but in other ways, I was owed a lot of money that I never got. But
that reminds me of when I wrestled in Puerto Rico, the bounce check fees that you get from.
Oh, they're terrible, terrible. We would run to the bank in New York. We would drive to New York to the bank that issued the check to try and get money, from an account that was dry. And, how pissed are you? You're driving three states out of your way to go to this bank to hear, nope, there's no money in that account.
Would you ever have imagined back in those days that Paul Heyman would have gone on to have such a long WWE career in the end and have so much power in WWE?
I mean, I can say it for sure. He is one of the greatest wrestling minds that I've ever met. And one of the most talented performers. And I'm not just saying that to blow smoke up his ass. I mean, he can out-talk anyone. And believe it or not, I have no hate towards the man. If it wasn't for Paul, I would not be sitting here today. So I can honestly tell you that I've never woke up and said to myself, God, I hate Paul Heyman. I don't. I never will. I appreciate the opportunities that he gave me, and I'm thankful for the career that I had with ECW.
There's many fans on here that have been asking if you were around for that mass transit night.
Yes, I was. I didn't watch the match as it was going on. I was in the locker room for it. I do remember the kid saying that he was trained and he was of age. That I know for a fact that he said, but I just remember the aftermath and it was brutal. And yeah, it was horrible. I wasn't a fan of it at all.
Many people on here, of course, are asking about your memories and thoughts on New Jack's passing, who just passed away a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
a couple weeks ago today, actually.
I was at a convention. I was in Indianapolis at the Squared Circle Expo, and I was doing a Twitch stream. I was live, and one of the fans in the chat said, "Hey, did you hear New Jack died?" And I said, "What?" And so I said to Chad, the guy next to me, I said, "Can you look that up and see if it's legit?" Because, sometimes people just write stuff. And it had just hit. Boom, boom, boom. It was all over the place. And my heart just dropped. I thought he was doing well. Corona, I hadn't really seen anyone. I saw him, I think, right before Corona hit. And he looked great. He looked like he was doing well. And we were supposed to work on a project that's coming up together. So I was taken aback. I mean, I started getting all these mass texts with "I love you" and blah, blah, blah. The phone started ringing. I started calling people. And it's just terrible because there are so many people in that locker room that have passed that, you develop relationships with, but they become your family. And New Jack was part of my family. So it's horrible when anything like this happens. But I was just watching Legends of the Extreme, I think it's called, on High Spots. And it was Shane and then Mike Johnson and then me and then New Jack. And I was laughing my ass off watching this. New Jack was if you didn't know him, you would never know. He was one of the funniest guys in the world. And he had me cracking up through this whole thing. And that's the way I just want to remember him, being that fun-loving, funny man. So,
are you surprised that it was heart-related considering his admitted drug use over the decades?
I mean, no, doesn't drugs lead to heart issues sometimes? I mean, I think there was an episode where he said before that, he did so much coke, his heart stopped and they had to bring him back to life. His words, not mine. So no, I kind of was surprised that he passed away from a heart attack. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, could it be because of his excessive partying? We don't know what caused it. I have no clue, but I don't care what caused it. It just sucks. I'm just sad about it.
Yeah, I think Raven told the story that Sandman once tried to take the same amount of some sort of relaxer as New Jack and him had, and then Sandman ended up going to the hospital, I guess, because it was so shocking to his system. But speaking of Raven, what was it like working with him? One of the all-time greats in wrestling.
He's another one that has a good mind for the business. Yeah, Scotty was fun to work with as well. He's an incredible thinker. You know, he's very good with psychology. So Scotty taught me a lot about the business. And like I said, all the guys were really, really good to work with in our company.
So I assume Tommy Dreamer as well was good to work with.
Yeah, Tommy was great because he always knew how to get the girls over. And he, you know, all the guys were good at that, but Tommy especially, he always focused and showcased the girls. That's what I liked about him. He always made sure that there were a spot for us, and it was always placed in the right part of the match. And another, you know, he basically ran the shows with Paul, and then when Paul wasn't around, he you know, he took over. But he's another one that has a great mind for the business, and he always took care of me when he had to bump me. So I've never gotten hurt. Well, except for the one time when he fell on top of me, that really hurt. But other than that, he always took care of me.
A fan was just asking on here if you were there for the infamous incident with RVD saying "pick a hand."
Pick a hand. I was there, but I didn't see it. But I know the outcome. I think we all do.
What are your thoughts on RVD getting into the WWE Hall of Fame?
I think it's great. You know, a lot of people think that the Hall of Fame is just, I don't know, like a work, so to speak. But, you know, it's still an honor to be picked, and I'm happy for him, you know, and he got a nice payday out of it. And now all his indie prices can go up. So it's a win-win.
Well, I believe he's one of the highest paid indie wrestlers. I think he asked for something like 15 grand or something.
I don't know what he asked for, but God bless him if he can get it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, if he saved his money well, I don't hold that against him for asking so much. He's definitely worth it for sure. Now, when ECW went out of business, you ended up going to TNA for a while. How was that experience?
I really liked TNA. When I got the phone call to go over and work with them, they had told me it's a 4-night deal and it could be stretched out. We don't know when we're going to bring you in, blah, blah, blah. But we're going to start off with, you know, the shows are going to be like, I think it was $10. It's like a pay-per-view every week. And so I said, okay, you know, I just wanted to work and get back on TV. So I said, okay, whatever you want. And I remember they scheduled me for like a bunch of radio interviews. And the first radio interview I did, I remember the host telling me, so you're doing a lingerie battle royal. And I wasn't told that. And I was like, oh, am I really? And they're like, yeah, it's a battle royal. You get to wear lingerie. And I was like, oh, yippee, that's great. So I had to go out and buy this lingerie to do. And I was on the first and second show that TNA ever had. And then I was brought back again 2 more times. And then Jerry Jarrett was basically just like, we don't know what to do with you. And I just shook my head because I'm just like, I hate when they tell you that, like, oh, we have nothing for you. We don't know what to do with you. There's plenty of ideas. There's plenty of things you can do. Just say, we don't need you anymore. Like, I would rather that than, oh, we don't know. Because, you know, I have 50 ideas written in a book that we can go off of. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, but I felt bad. I really wanted to work there for, you know, an extensive amount of time, but it just didn't go that way. So
Who was the booker at that time? Was it Jerry and Jeff Jarrett working
yeah.
together still?
Yeah, Jeff was there and Jerry was there. And I mean, they had me doing like, I did the lingerie thing. And then it was for Miss TNA. You got a contract. So Kathy Dingham, who's a friend of mine, she ends up winning. And then they're telling us, well, you're going to go into a little feud with Kathy. And I said, that's great. And then we go and we have a strap match. And, you know, the week before, she didn't hit me hard enough, or she didn't sell the strap because I worked it to where I really wasn't hurting her, but she didn't sell it correctly. So we got in trouble for that. And then we did our own strap match, the two of us, and they said, you have to beat the shit out of each other, literally. So her and I went out there and we were literally hitting each other with the strap that we had welts on our back from it. And we thought we were going to get this big program together and they just dropped it. And I was just like, okay. And I think I sat home for a couple weeks and then I got a call to come back in. And I worked with Blue Meanie and Jasmine St. Clair to where I took a DDT from Meanie and they took me out on a stretcher and they had me wear like a neck brace. And that was my 4th appearance. So now in my head, I'm thinking, oh, they're going to have me come back in. So I did all my indie appearances in this neck brace because I'm like, oh, I have to keep the gimmick going. Here, they never even brought me back in. So I could have took that brace and threw it in the trash because I didn't, but I'm trying to keep it going because I thought, well, maybe something will happen, and it didn't. But I really enjoyed my time there. I enjoyed all the women that worked there. You know, I met a lot of the guys that I didn't know from before. There was a young AJ Styles there, super nice. Everybody was really nice. It was a fun locker room. So
A couple years later, you ended up signing with WWE. I think you did the ECW One Night Stand appearance first.
yes.
Was that kind of a welcome invitation to get that opportunity?
I'm not really sure. I know, you know, that weekend was a big one. Shane Douglas was running his I think it was, what was it called? Hardcore Homecoming or something at the arena. I was booked for that on a Friday. I get the call to come in on a Sunday as a surprise. So they tell me, you're going to be working, you're going to do a run in. He tells me everything. It's Dreamer on the phone and tells me everything. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I got a double payday that weekend. Great. And I go in and I do the deal and it's literally, I'm out there for 2 minutes. It's like nothing mind blowing, you know, but it was a simple payday. It was fine. And go home. Don't think anything about it. Didn't really talk to anybody for like a year. And from WWE, I get a call then from Dreamer saying, well, they're bringing ECW back. And right then and there, I'm just like, what? Like, I don't get it, you know, and I'm told you're going to do the same exact thing that you did for Paul and for the original ECW. And we're going to pair you with a guy and you're going to be a manager and it's going to be great and blah, 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 blah. And I don't know. It was just something in my stomach was saying, it's not going to happen this way. And I was so skeptical at first. And I just said, can I sign for a year? And Tommy's like, no, you have to sign for 3 years because they want to know that you're loyal. And I was just like, I'm not going to last for 3 years. I know I'm not. It's just, I'm 34 years old now. There's no way. But it's my last run. It's my last big run. And let me try, you know, maybe I'm wrong. Let me go in and see what happens. I wasn't wrong. I was right. 100%. So I call it the fake ECW.
What was your dealings with Vince McMahon like?
I didn't really deal with Vince that much in the beginning. Johnny Ace was my go-to guy. And, you know, I would go in Johnny's office and just tell him, like, I'm not happy. I broke down in tears the one time and I asked for my release. I was like, please, can I just go home? And he's just like, why? Yeah, why? And I was like, I'm not doing anything. That, you know, I'm doing bikini contest against Barbie Blank, who is a doll. Don't get me wrong, but she's 19. I'm 34 years old. I came here to work. I didn't come here to wear a bikini. Like, I want to work. You told me I was going to work. And, you know, Johnny just kept saying, just be patient. You know, we'll find something for you and blah, blah, blah. And I was in tears. And he said, just go back to catering and relax and wipe your face off and this and that. And I was, all right, fine. And so I go to catering, and then I remember I got up and I went. This was after 2 meetings in Johnny's office that day because I was just fed up. I was like, just send me home. And I went to go get my draw, and I was just standing in line for my draw, and I just heard, Francine, can I talk to you for a second? And here it was Vince, and I almost shit my pants. And I was like, oh, because I had seen Vince, all I do is hello, Vince, shake his hand. That was the, as far as I went in talking with Vince. I had higher ups tell me to literally put lotion or oil on my chest and lean over Vince's knock on the door and lean over Vince's desk and try to, talk. And I said, I don't do that. That's not, I don't want to do that. Like, I'd rather be sent home. I'm not comfortable with that. And that's not the way I was brought into this business. I just want to work. So Vince pulls me out of line. And he just says, you're a beautiful girl, but beautiful girls are a dime a dozen. And I don't know what you can do. And I just turned around. I looked right at him. I said, didn't you buy our tape library? And he says, yes, but I don't watch ECW. I don't know what ECW people do. And I was taken
maybe you should have, and it would have been a success.
I was just like, what, are you kidding me? You hired all these people and you have no clue what we can do. That blew my mind. And, he's like, you have to do something to impress me, to let me know, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Vince, I'm here to work. Like, I just want to work, and, I was like, I'm sorry, sir. And he's like, stop saying sorry. And I said, sorry. And he's like, I told you to stop apologizing. And he started hollering at me. And I was just like, okay. And then I was afraid to say anything. And he goes, okay, how about this? He goes, the next time you see me, I don't care where we are. He goes, you run up to me and you smack me on the back and you say, hey, Vince, what do you got for me? And I go, really? And he goes, yeah, I don't care who I'm with or what I'm doing. He goes, I want you to do that. And that'll prove to me that you want to work. And I was like, okay. So we're at Raw, right? Because we had to go to Raw and sit there and do nothing for hours from 12 o'clock to like 11:30 at night. It was terrible. And I saw him at the end of the corridor. He was so far away from me. He was with a bunch of suits. I ran up to him like an asshole, and I ran and I smacked him on the back, and he looked at me and I said, hey, Vince, what do you got for me? And he kind of looked at me, and then he grabbed me and he hugged me, and he was like, that's my girl. And he walked away. And I just stood there, and I said to myself, ooh, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. The next night, I think it was ECW SmackDown, and my name was on the TV, the paper. So I guess it worked. And that's when they paired me with Balls Mahoney.
Would you consider WWE a family environment? They always like to call themselves the WWE family.
I wasn't there long enough to experience that. I lasted 6 months. I told you there was no way I was going to last for 3 years. I kind of feel like if you're not homegrown and a huge name that they can make millions of dollars off of, they don't care. I was happy for the opportunity. Don't get me wrong, but I honestly don't feel like I was given a fair chance. Because I expressed over and over again how badly I wanted to work. And I remember when I worked the program with Ariel, Shelly Martinez, you have to walk to the ring, and Vince is at ringside and he's watching this. So you have to literally do your entrance, walk to the ring, get in and go over your match in front of Vince. And I remember in the middle of going over everything, I walked over to Vince and I said, can I take Kevin Thorne's finisher instead of, what we were supposed to do? And he says, no, Francine, we don't do that here. And I was just like, well, what do you do here? You know what I mean? Like, I'm willing to bump and work, and shot me right down. Nope, we don't do that here. I was just like, okay, and what can you do? There's nothing you can do when you pitch everything under the sun and you're just told no over and over again. I don't even know why they hired me, to be honest with you. So grateful for the opportunity, made a little bit of money, but as I look back, it was a disaster.
Speaking of making money, good question here from a long story short. What was the pay structure like for ECW performers in WWE?
From what I've seen, I was getting the same amount of pay as the other girls. And I don't want to give a number because I know some of the boys were getting less than some of the girls. So I don't want to piss anybody off. But I was under the same pay structure as the rest of the girls. The only thing with me is I had no merchandise. I didn't get any merchandise sales. I wasn't on any pay-per-views but the 2005 one. So I didn't get any bonuses. I was scanned for a action figure. Never got it. So I never got a payday from that. So I was just making my weekly and that was it.
And of course, there wasn't that many ECW house shows. I think they tried it for a while, but it didn't really amount to much because you get bonuses, right, for house shows there?
No, I never got it. I didn't. And we piggybacked off of SmackDown. So it was SmackDown ECW house shows. So wherever SmackDown was, they would integrate us. So on the house shows, we'd work with the SmackDown girls, and it would be like Team ECW Vixens versus SmackDown Divas. That's what we always did on house shows.
Last question here. We're going to have you back another time.
That was quick.
I was told to ask you about Rick Rude in ECW. Is there some story about Rick Rude in ECW?
Not really. I mean, people keep throwing this certain spot that aired on television up to where, I feel like Rick took it a little too far. The spot was inappropriate. And when we got to the back, I never said anything about it because Rick was in the business forever. And, I was aware of him flipping me, but I didn't know to what extent was going to happen. And if you don't know what it is, go look it up. But everybody keeps saying, what about Me Too? And what about this? And what about that? And it was like back then, Me Too didn't exist. It wasn't a thing. And, if you said too much, you got reprimanded, especially from someone who was a veteran. So yeah, I felt the spot went too far, but I just kept my mouth shut and never said anything about it.
There's a fan that wants to know if you still do Comic Cons. Well, yes, you mentioned earlier you do. And actually even do wrestling appearances. You were supposed to appear in Texas in July, but Teddy Long put a stop to that. But hopefully you'll do it another time, and you have a Twitch page as well.
I do. I twitch.tv/ECW Diva Francine. I just started playing poker on there. We did our first poker stream last night. It was a lot of fun. Sometimes I cook. Sometimes I just chat. We do an AEW watch along. I just try to do a bunch of fun stuff and, just entertain, because that's what we're all here to do, isn't it?
My dog wanted to say hello to you.
How cute. Big guy like you with a little tiny dog. I love it.
Oh, she's vicious. She doesn't think she's small. She'll go after anyone.
She's like me. She's a scrapper.
So as far as your actual social media, if people want to look you up on social media, could you tell us your social links?
Yes, sure. So across the board on social media, I am at ECW Diva Francine. That's on Twitter and Instagram. There's also a Facebook page. I believe it's under the Queen of Extreme Francine. And we mentioned the Patreon and the podcast. And I also do Cameo. Please, if you ever want a Cameo, book it off the Twitter, because if you book it from the Cameo site, they take 55%. It's highway robbery. But yeah, I'm just trying to stay out there and work from home as much as I can. And I'm really enjoying it.
And how many kids do you have, by the way?
27 children. I have 2. My daughter will be 12. My son's 9.
And you still manage to keep your abs, because your abs have been showing in part of this interview.
A little bit. Just, I had 2 C-sections a while ago. But, I'm going to be 50 next year. I think I'm in pretty good shape. My kids keep me young. And, just trying to enjoy life, because that's what it's about. It's about family and just having a good time. And I'm loving every minute of it. So I
Uh,
thank fans. I thank everybody for all the support over the years. And I just love everybody. I love you guys.
Would you ever let your kids in wrestling?
No, I wouldn't want them to do it. I mean, if their heart was set on it, I try to help as much as I can, but wrestling's not a thing in my house. So they both have career paths that are nowhere near wrestling, and I am super okay with that.
Any final comments you want to let the fans know to close this off?
Yeah, one more project that I'm working on is called foreverfan.club. It is your one-stop shop for everything extreme, and a lot of the old ECW crew will be involved. Launch date is coming soon, but check us out and follow us on Twitter if you can. A lot of big projects coming up with all of us involved, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you